Chapter 2 of Revolted Woman by Charles George Harper. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Dress Reformers. I do not like the fashion of your garments. You will say they are Persian attire, but let them be changed. King Lear. Modern dress reform crusades have ever been allied with womanly revolts against man's authority. They proceeded originally from that fount of vulgarity, that never-failing source of offence, America. In the United States, that ineffable land of wooden nutmegs and timber hams, of strange religions, of gerrymandering and unscrupulous logrollery, the prophet Bloomer first arose, and, discarding the feminine skirt, stood forth, unashamed and blatant, in trousers. The wrath of the Bloomers, as the followers of the prophet were termed, was calculated to disestablish at once and for ever the skirts and frocks, the gowns and miscellaneous feminine fripperies that had obtained throughout the centuries, and they conceived that with the abolishment of skirts the long-sustained supremacy of man was also to disappear, even as the walls of Jericho fell before the trumpet sound of the Lord's own people. For these enthusiasts were no cooing doves, but rather shrieking cats, and they were both abusive and overweening. No more should tempestuous petticoats inspire a Herrick to dainty verse, but the woman of the immediate future should move majestically through the wondering continents of the old world and the new with mannish strides, in place of the feminine mincing gait induced by clinging draperies. Away, Erato, and your sister muses, if indeed your susceptibilities would have allowed your remaining to behold the spectacle. For really, that must have been a sight for sore eyes, to adopt the expression of the period. The too convincing vision of a middle-aged woman, proof against ridicule, consumed with all seriousness and an ineffable zeal for converting all and sundry to her peculiar views in the matter of a becoming and convenient attire. And never was prophet less justified of his country than the Bloomer seer of hers, for nakedness, even to undraped piano legs, was then a reproach in the country of the Stars and Stripes, where legs are not legs, an't please you, but extremities or limbs, where trousers are neither more than pantaloons nor less than continuations. In that land of freedom, where one would have outraged all modesty by the merest mention of legs or feet, these last indispensable adjuncts being generally known as pedal extremities, it surely was illogical in the highest degree that women should wear a species of trouser, and thereby proclaim the indelicate fact to all the world of their possession of legs. Truly, Pudicitia is as American a goddess as Mammon is a god. For the Bloomer costume was nothing else but a travesty of male attire. Aggressiveness is inseparable, it would seem, from all new ideas, and the minor prophets of Bloomerism were aggressive enough in all conscience. They were not content with wearing the breeches in the literal sense. They sought to convert all womankind to their faith by the writing of pamphlets and the making of speeches on public platforms. Mrs. Anne Bloomer was their fount of inspiration. She it was who introduced the craze to America in 1849. 2 years later it had crossed the herring pond, and that Annus Mirabilis, the year of the Great Exhibition, witnessed a few of its enthusiasts, beldams in breeches, clad in this hybrid garb, walking in London streets. But women refused to be converted in any large numbers, and only a few more than usually impudent females went so far as to back their views by wearing the badges of the cult in public. But although so few English women were converted to the new dress, and though fewer still had the courage to wear it, the bloomer agitation was largely noticed in the papers and by the satirists of the time. It was noticed, indeed, in a manner entirely disproportioned to its real import, and the humorous papers, the ballad-mongers, and innumerable private witlings had their fling at the follies of these early dress reformers. The Bloomers (unlovely name) held meetings in London, attended, it must be owned, by crowds of ribald unbelievers. And they even went to the length of holding a Bloomer ball, a grotesque idea hailed with delight by a roaring crowd which assembled after the ball, and showed its prejudices by hooting the ridiculous women who had come attired in jackets and trousers like those of the Turk. No Turk, indeed, so unspeakable as they. But the crowd did not stop at this point. They had brought dead cats, decayed cabbages, rotten eggs, and all imaginable articles of offence with which to point their wit, and they used them freely, not only upon the women, but also upon the men who accompanied them. For discrimination was not easy between the sexes in the badly lit streets, when both wore breeches, and at a time when men went generally clean-shaven, and so the rightfully breeched were as despitefully used as the usurpers of man's distinctive dress. And so Bloomerism languished a while, and presently died out, but not before a vast amount had been written and printed in its praise or abuse. The satirical effusions which owe their origin to this mania are none of them remarkable for reticence or delicacy. Indeed, the subject did not allow of this last quality, and the broadsheet verses issued from the purlieus of Drury Lane by the successors of Catnach are, some of them, very frank. Perhaps the best and most quotable is the broadsheet, "I'll be a Bloomer." The writer, not a literary man by any means, starts off at score, and his first verses, if models neither of taste, rhyme, nor rhythm, are vigorous. It is when the inspiration runs dry, and he relies upon a slogging industry with which to eke out his broadsheet, that exhaustion becomes evident. I'll be a Bloomer. Listen, females all, no matter what your trade is, Old Nick is in the girls, the devil's in the ladies. Married men may weep and tumble in the ditches, since women are resolved to wear the shirt and breeches. Ladies do declare a change should have been sooner. The women, one and all, are going to join the Bloomers. Prince Albert and the Queen had such a jolly row, sirs. She threw off stays and put on waistcoat, coat, and trousers. It will be fun to see ladies possessed of riches strutting up and down in Wellingtons and breeches. Bloomers are funny folks. No ladies can be faster. They say 'tis almost time that petticoats were master. They will not governed be by peelers, snobs, or proctors, but take up their degree as counsellors and doctors. No bustles will they wear, nor stocks, depend upon it, but jerry hats and caps instead of dandy bonnet. Trousers to their knees, and whiskers round their faces, a watch chain in their fob, and a pair of leather braces. The tailors must be sharp in making noble stitches, and clap their burning goose upon the ladies' breeches. Their pretty fingers will be just as sore as mutton, till they have found the way their trousers to unbutton. The Bloomers all declare that men are sad deceivers. They'll take a turn and be prigs, dustmen, and coal-heavers, members of Parliament, and make such jolly fusses, cobble up old ladies' shoes, drive cabs and omnibuses. Their husbands they will whop, and squander all their riches, make them nurse the kids, and wash their shirts and breeches. If men should say a word, there'd be a jolly row, sirs. Their wives would make them sweat, and beat them with their trousers. The world's turned upside down. The ladies will be tailors, and serve old England's queen as soldiers and as sailors. Won't they look funny when the seas are getting lumpy, or when they ride astride upon an Irish donkey? The ladies will be right, their husbands will be undone, since bloomers have arrived to teach the folks of London. The females all, I mean, how to lay out their riches in Yankee doodle-doos and a stunning pair of breeches. Female apparel now is gone to pot, I vow, sirs, and ladies will be fined who don't wear coats and trousers. Blucher boots and hats, and shirts with handsome stitches. Oh dear, what shall we do when women wear the breeches? Now some will wear smock frocks and hobnail shoes, I vow, sirs, Jenny, Bet, and Sal, cocked hat and woolen trousers, Yankee doodle-doo, rolling in the ditches. Married men prepare to buy the women breeches. Punch had, among other bloomer skits, the following rather good example. Mrs. Grundy on Bloomerism. Hoity-toity, don't tell me about the nasty stupid fashion. Stuff and nonsense. The idea's enough to put one in a passion. I'd allow no such high jinkses if I was the creature's parent. Bloomers are they, forward minxes. I soon bloomer 'em, I warrant. I've no patience nor forbearance with 'em, scorning them as bore 'em. What, they can't dress like their mothers was content to dress before 'em? Wearing what d'ye call 'ems? Gracious, brass itself ain't half so brazen. Why, they must look more audacious than that what's-a-name, Amazon. Ha! They'll smoke tobacco next, and take their thimblefuls of brandy, bringing shame upon their sex by aping of the jack-a-dandy. Yes, and then you'll have them shortly showing off their bold bare faces, prancing all so pert and portly at their derbies and their races. Oh, when once they have begun, there's none can say where they'll be stopping. Out they'll go with dog and gun, perhaps a shooting and a popping. Ay, and like as not you'll see, if you've a bloomer for your daughter, her ladyship, so fine and free, a-pulling matches on the water, sitting in a potass tap, a-talking politics and jawing. Or else a-reading Punch, mayhap, and he-heing and haw-hawing. I can't a-bear such flighty ways, I can't abide such flaunty tastes, and so they must leave off their stays, to show their dainty shapes and waistses. I'd not have my feet filigreed for ever so like these young women. No, you won't see me, I'll be bound, dressed half and half as a young feller. I'll stick to my old shawl and gownd, my pattens and my umbereller. The bloomer agitation was but the beginning of a series of crazes for the reform of women's dress, and the girl of the period furor succeeded it after an interval of several years. True, the girl of the period was scarcely a dress reformer, but her dress and manners were sufficiently pronounced, and certainly her vulgarity could not have been surpassed by the most fat and blousy bloomer that ever held forth upon a public platform. To Mrs. Lynn Linton belongs the honour of having discovered the girl, and she communicated her discovery to the Saturday Review in 1868. This it was that gave some point to the saying that the girl of the period was but the girl of a periodical. And certainly the vulgarity of the girl of the period was extremely pronounced. It was a vulgarity that showed itself in bustles and panniers. the Grecian bend, skirts frilled and flounced and hung about with ridiculous festoons, and short enough to display her intolerable Balmoral boots. An absurdly inadequate rink hat rendered her chignon all the more obvious, and blank. But enough. The man of the period was her equal in absurdity. He cultivated a hateful affectation of lassitude and indifference. He affected a peculiarly odious drawl, and he taxed his mind with an effort to sustain a constantly nil admirari attitude toward things the most admirable and happenings the most startling. He wore the most ridiculous fashion of whiskers, compared with which the perennial mutton chop and the bearded chin and clean-shaven upper lip of the dissenter or typical grocer are things of beauty and a satisfaction to the aesthetic sense. This fashion was the Piccadilly weeper variety of adornment known at this day, chiefly owing to Southern's impersonation of a contemporary lisping fop as the Dundreary. This creature was a fitting mate to the girl of the period. He married her, and the most obvious results are the Gaiety Johnnies, the Mashers, and the Chappies of today, whose retreating chins and foreheads afford subjects for the sad contemplation of philosophers, to whom we will leave them. As for their female offspring, they are, doubtless, the Lotties and Totties of Mrs. Lynn Linton's loathing, who smoke cigarettes and ape the dress and deportment of the ladies of the Alhambra or the Empire promenades. It is at once singular and amusing to notice how surely all women's dress reform agitations move in the same groove, that of a more or less close imitation of man's attire. Even fashions which are not ostensible reforms have a decided tendency to make for masculinity. The girls who, some few years since, cut their hair short, like the boys, who wore bowler hats, shirt fronts, men's collars and neckties, who carried walking sticks, or that extraordinary combination of walking stick and sunshade, known facetiously as a husband-beater, who affected tailor-made frocks, donned man-like jackets, and adopted a masculine gait, were not accredited reformers with a mission, but they showed, excellently well, the spirit of the age, and if they were wanting in thoroughness, why, Lady Harberton, with her divided skirts, was a very Strafford for thoroughness in her particular line. Divided skirts were introduced to the notice of the public some 10 years ago by Viscountess Harberton and a society of dress reformers, calling themselves, possibly on lucus a non lucendo principles, first a national society, and at a later period arrogating the title of rational. It may seem matter for ridicule that an obscure coterie of grandames should adopt such a grandiose title as the first, or that they should, by using the rational epithet, be convicted of allowing the inference that they considered every woman irrational who did not adhere to their principles. But, like all reformers, they were without humour and consumed with a deadly earnestness. They, unlike the rest of the world, saw nothing for laughter in the public discussions which they initiated, by which they sought to show that corsets were not only useless but harmful, and that the petticoat might advantageously be discarded for trousers worn underneath an ordinary skirt, somewhat after the fashion that obtains in riding costumes. But, for all the pother anent divided skirts, they did not catch on, and a newer rival, another variety of rational dress, now rules the field, the camp, the grove, but more especially the road. For the popular and widespread pastime of cycling has given this newest craze a very much better chance than ever the Bloomer heresy or the original divided skirt frenzy obtained. And it is not too much to say that, If the cycle had not been so democratic a plaything, this latest experiment in dress reform would have been but little heard of. Rational dress, as seen on the flying females who pedal down the roads today, is only bloomerism with a difference. That is to say, the legs are clothed in roomy knickerbockers down to the knees, and encased in cloth gaiters for the rest, buttoned down to the ankles. These in place of the Turk-like trousers tied round the ankles and finished off with frills of over 40 years ago. As for the attenuated skirts of the prophet bloomer, rational dress replaces them with a species of frantic frock coat, spreading as to its ample skirts, but tightened round the waist. A Robin Hood hat, even as in the bygone years, crowns this confection. And really, the parallels between old-time schismatics and the modern revolting daughters are wonderfully close. Everything recurs in this world in cycles of longer or shorter duration. The whirligig of time may be uncertain in its revolutions, but it performs the allotted round at last, and so surely as yesterday's sun will reappear tomorrow, as certainly will the crinolines, the chignons, and the bloomer vagaries of yesteryear recur. You may call the recurrent fashions by newer names, but by any name they take, they remain practically the same. The farthingale of Queen Bess's time is the crinoline of the Middle Victorian period, and came in once more as the full skirt of some seasons since. The chignon is resurrected as the Brighton bun, and is as objectionable in its reincarnation as it was in its previous existence. And we have already seen that rational dress, divided skirts, and the bloomer costume are but different titles for one fad. The very latest development is not pretty, but there, 'tis pretty Fanny's way. And so an end to all discussion. End of chapter 2.